I mentioned these. Some of you may look at the website. There is on the ACC website playing tips. A lot of the stuff I'm talking about here is there. And also you can print whatever you want. There's no charge for anything. You know, DeLynn Culver has stuff there. Dan Barlow. There's John Chambers. We'll be talking about John Chambers a bit as this moves along. Now, I mentioned that there's two rules that apply, and I think you'll have a, if you look at the bottom of that, you have a paper that's numbered 2-1, and you see on the bottom half of that second page there, I've already covered the big hand rule. The small hand rule is quite a bit different, and it covers more than half of the hands you pick up. You hear people talk about the basic 8. There's no such thing. There is no such thing as a basic 8. If you're getting a basic 8, you're winning cribbage games like you never saw in your life. The average hand is usually about 7.1. So, and there's a whole lot of 6s and 5s. So the idea that there's a basic 8, there's no basic 8. Forget that. And you won't need to know if you're picking up your cards every time you got 8. You won't need any of the stuff I teach here in class. You just show up and lay your cards down. But so there's a small hand rule which applies to most of the hands we get, and that is that we maximize the points. We maximize the points. For instance, you might pick up, well, you'll have an exercise there. I'll give you some examples here. Small hand. Again, we think about the crib as an extension of the hand. So I pick up my cards. I've got a 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 8. What's the most points I can get out of that hand? Assuming there's no chance for a flush. Now, all these hands, I'm assuming there's no chance for a flush. 1, 5, 2, 6, 3, 8. I got a run of 3 with this 1, 2, 3, and I've got a 5, 6, which maybe I remember is a pretty good discard. So I start with 5. 1, 2, 3 in my hand, 5, 6 to the crib. That's the most I can get out of that. I don't sacrifice anything in a small hand. In a hand that has 8 points or less, I don't sacrifice anything. So those sacrifice limits I talked about don't have anything to do with small hands. They only have to do with hands that have big potential. And then I look at another hand. I've got a 2, 4, 10, 3, 10, 5. Oh, I remember 2, 3 is good. If I keep the 2, 3, what do? I reduce the value of the hand, don't I? Mm-hmm. If I keep the 10, 10, 4, 5, I start with 6, and I put a 2, 3 in the crib for 2. I've got 8. Start with 8. If I do it any other way, I'm starting with fewer points. As a rule, you're always correct if you start with more. I showed you some examples where that might not be the case. Remember the sacrifice limits and the 5, 5, Jack, Jack, so on. But with most of the hands we pick up, they're going to be worth small amounts of points, and we don't want to give up any. And we want to remember these strong discards. You see, in all of these screwy hands, I was able to put a strong discard in the crib. Here, we had a 2, 5, 8, 9, and a 5, king. So I keep the 2, 8, 9, 10 with a run of 3, and I put the 5, king in the crib. So I've got 3 in my hand, 2 in the crib, guaranteed. And in this case, I've also kept the best pegging cards. Sometimes, depending where you are on the board, that's something we'll get into. We're going to have 2 or 3 classes on pegging, and so we'll get into pegging later. It's not possible to cover it all at the same time, but you know it's all related. So the game's all tied together. So that's kind of how it works on small hands. And the big hand rule with the sacrifice limits applies to big hands. Don't give up more than the sacrifice limits say you can. Because what will happen, you will have fewer points. If you give up 4 points to put a deuce tray to your crib, you should have kept it in your hand. But if you give up 2 to put it in your crib, good. Now, the other thing you should ask yourself when you're dealing, let's say you find yourself looking at a hand that says 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. You're dealing and you're holding a 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, the only thing you could have put in your crib is a 7-8 or an 8-8. If you did that, it's right. But that's the only thing you could have thrown off of that hand to your crib. Otherwise, the 5 should have been in the crib or the 2, 3. Because you're holding a 5 for 1 point. I mean, a 5 with a 9 to the crib would be better than holding the 5 in your hand for 1 point. Anyway, if you're holding that hand 2, 3, 4, 5 and you're dealing, and you didn't put 7-8 or 8-8, you didn't discard right. If you had the 6, you'd have kept it, and you'd have tossed the 2, 3. But 8-8, 7-8 would be exactly right. You should play the 2, 3, 4, 5, 7-7 or 7-8 to your crib. But anything else wouldn't be. If you had a face card in the crib, it ought to have gone with a 5. If you had 2 face cards, then, yeah. You had a hand a little earlier. Sometimes there are exceptions to the rules. And you can play a lifetime and it doesn't make any difference. There's 13,000 some combinations. If you don't know 7 of them, nobody will ever notice a difference in your game. But if you have a question about what an exception might be or something like that, I'd be glad to tell you. But there are some exceptions that I wouldn't take the time to lay out here, because your game could improve just a whole lot without even knowing that they existed.